He was a millionaire, haunted by loneliness, desperate for an heir. William Davenport crafted a contract, cold and precise. He contracted a woman, Amelia Vance, found in desperate straits for a single purpose, to carry his child. The terms were crystal clear, a transaction, a payment, and then she would disappear. No attachments, no complications. A perfect, emotionless arrangement. But life rarely adheres to contracts. Then came the birth. Not one child, but 3. Triplets, tiny, perfect, demanding breaths filling the sterile hospital room. And in that moment, everything fractured. As Amelia held her newborns, tears streaming down her face, the carefully worded clauses of the agreement turned to meaningless ash. I can't leave them, she sobbed, her voice raw with a love that defied any signature. William, please, this contract, it doesn't matter now. This is what matters. The deal demanded she walk away. Her heart screamed for her to stay. Faced with her desperate plea, the undeniable bond already formed, and the 3 tiny lives utterly dependent on them, the millionaire's meticulously planned world began to unravel. What happens when a legal document collides with the unstoppable force of maternal love? What did William do when faced with the impossible choice born from his own cold bargain? If this story already touches your heart, smash that like button. Let us know in the comments what you think William should do next, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter of this gripping journey as their deal unravels completely. Stay tuned to find out what happened next. The rain came down in relentless sheets, blurring the sprawling panorama of Manhattan into streaks of grey and shimmering light. From the 70th floor of the Davenport Tower, the city looked less like a vibrant metropolis and more like an abstract painting, beautiful, distant, and utterly indifferent. William Davenport stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, a silhouette against the turbulent sky. 45 years old, with a fortune vast enough to reshape skylines and a name etched onto foundations across the globe, he possessed everything quantifiable. Yet the echoing silence of the opulent space was a constant gnawing reminder of what he lacked. The apartment, a testament to minimalist wealth curated by architects who spoke of negative space and clean lines, felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit dedicated to his success. Cold marble gleamed under recessed lighting, sculptures stood sentinel in empty corners, expensive art adorned the walls, chosen for investment value rather than emotional resonance. It was a gilded cage, meticulously constructed, reflecting the owner's own carefully guarded heart. 2 marriages had dissolved into bitter settlements and public whispers, leaving behind the acrid taste of betrayal. Love, William had concluded with chilling finality, was a poor investment. A volatile market, driven by unpredictable emotions, ending inevitably in loss. He'd seen firsthand how his wealth acted not as a bond, but as a corrosive agent, attracting women who loved the idea of William Davenport, the power and the prestige, but never the man trapped beneath the layers of corporate armor. He shuddered involuntarily. No, love was off the table, permanently. But the silence screamed for something more, not companionship, not romance. Those were minefields he refused to navigate again. What he craved was simpler, purer. A legacy, an heir, someone to carry the Davenport name forward, a biological continuation untainted by emotional contracts or fragile promises. A child not conceived in the messy entanglement of affection, but through a clean, manageable transaction. His jaw tightened. It was logical, it was necessary, it was the only way to fill the hollowness without risking his carefully barricaded heart. He turned from the window, the city's muted roar a distant hum. Time to leave the sterile perfection of his sky-high sanctuary. Downstairs his Bentley waited, cocooning him in handcrafted leather and silence as it slid into the rain-swept Manhattan streets. The rhythmic sweep of the wipers seemed to keep time with the relentless churning of his thoughts. An heir. How? Adoption felt impersonal, lacking the crucial blood tie. Traditional surrogacy involved complications, emotional ones. He needed a vessel, uncomplicated, detached. Someone who wouldn't mistake a business arrangement for something more. Someone who needed what he could offer, financial escape, as much as he needed what they could provide. The thought was cold, calculating. He knew it. But it felt like the only rational path forward. He was navigating the congested crosstown traffic near Central Park West when the light turned red. Rain hammered against the roof. And then a shape materialized beside his window, indistinct at first through the rain-streaked glass. A figure huddled against the downpour, extending a tentative hand towards his car. He lowered the tinted window a fraction, irritation pricking him. She was young, perhaps late 20s, though hardship had etched premature lines onto her face. Soaked hair clung to pale skin. Her clothes were thin, ragged, offering little protection against the biting wind and rain. But it was her eyes that caught him, held him for a split second longer than annoyance should allow. They were blue, a startling stormy blue, and they weren't filled with the vacant desperation he usually saw. There was something else there, a flicker of defiance perhaps. A guarded weariness that spoke of battles fought and lost, but not yet surrendered. Anything. Her voice was barely audible above the city's thrum, roughened by the cold. William's first instinct, honed by years of insulating himself from the city's messy realities, was sharp dismissal. "Get lost," he snapped, the words clipped, impatient for the light to change. Why waste a moment on this misery? His life was too meticulously ordered for such intrusions. The light turned green. He accelerated smoothly, leaving the figure behind in the swirling rain and exhaust fumes. Yet driving away, the image of those startling blue eyes lingered, an unwelcome afterimage against the expensive dashboard. He'd encountered countless beggars, panhandlers, the city's unfortunate backdrop. He usually felt nothing, a calculated indifference. But this time, something felt different. A nagging, unfamiliar disturbance. Was it the defiance, or perhaps a fleeting, unwelcome flicker of empathy that pricked through his armor? He told himself it was ridiculous, illogical. He drove several blocks, the internal dissonance growing louder than the Bentley's purring engine. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. This was absurd, yet the image persisted. He swore under his breath, a sharp, frustrated sound swallowed by the car's luxury. Then, with a sudden, impulsive movement that felt entirely out of character, he executed a sharp U-turn, tires hissing on the wet pavement, heading back towards the intersection. He found her still there, a solitary figure shivering near the curb, seemingly resigned to the relentless rain. He pulled the Bentley alongside her, the powerful engine a low growl. He lowered the passenger window completely this time. "Get in." His tone was flat, commanding, devoid of warmth. No questions. She flinched, taking a small step back, suspicion flaring in those blue eyes. She looked from his expensive car to his impassive face, the calculation clear. Life on the streets was a harsh teacher. "I'm not that kind of woman," she replied, her voice quiet but carrying an unexpected firmness. "If that's what you're looking for." William raised a single eyebrow, a ghost of amusement, or perhaps just surprise, touching his lips. "Do you honestly believe," his voice dripped with condescending precision, "a man like me would be interested in someone like you? For that?" The unspoken insult hung heavy in the air. "You don't possess nearly enough conventional appeal to attract me in that manner. You are perfectly safe. Now stop this foolishness and get in." He glanced pointedly at the rain. "Or would you prefer to freeze out here? I don't have all day." She hesitated, searching his face. His bluntness, paradoxically, felt more genuine than false kindness. The harsh words offered a strange sort of reassurance. After a moment that stretched between heartbeats, she nodded stiffly and opened the heavy car door, sliding cautiously onto the plush leather seat. The scent of rain and damp wool filled the car's pristine interior. William pulled back into traffic without a word. The silence inside the car was thick, broken only by the wipers and the distant city sounds. He drove, his gaze fixed ahead, but his mind was racing, formulating the terms of the proposal. He glanced sideways at her. Now that she was closer, out of the obscuring rain, he could see the fine bone structure beneath the grime, the intelligence lurking in her guarded eyes. Life had been cruel to her, that much was obvious. "I'm going to make you an offer," he finally said, his voice returning to the cool, measured tone he used in boardrooms. One that will change your life. He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. I require a child, an heir, not a wife, not a relationship, simply a child. He saw her stiffen, her eyes widening slightly. It will be conducted via artificial insemination. You will be well compensated, housed and cared for throughout the pregnancy. Afterward, he continued clinically, you will receive a sum substantial enough to ensure your future comfort, perhaps facilitate your return to Europe, if that is your wish. You will relinquish all rights and disappear from the child's life. Permanently. She stared at him, processing the extraordinary, almost unbelievable words. A child, she echoed, the word barely a whisper. You promised you wouldn't. Touch you. William cut her off, impatience returning. Of course not. This is a clinical arrangement. Anything else is entirely out of the question. Silence descended again. Amelia Vance, she hadn't offered her name, but he would need it for the contract, turned her head to look out the window, watching the blurred cityscape. Her mind reeled. This was madness, a devil's bargain offered by a stranger in a ridiculously expensive car. And yet, freedom. A way out of the relentless cycle of hunger and cold, a chance to escape the ghosts of her past, the lost dreams, the transatlantic gamble that had ended in ruin. She thought of France, the scent of lavender fields, the life she'd fled seeking opportunity, only to find herself invisible on these indifferent streets. A faint murmur escaped her lips, perhaps in French, heavy with resignation. William, a polyglot himself, didn't need a translation. Misery. He waited. Then, coldly practical, I have 2 questions. What is your name? And what brought you to this state? She took a deep, shuddering breath. Amelia Vance. Her voice trembled slightly, but held a core of dignity. She briefly sketched her story. The move from France 5 years ago, the initial hope, the series of misfortunes, the job loss, the spiraling descent into homelessness. She mentioned family, or the lack thereof now, a business that failed years ago, leaving wreckage in its wake. A detail offered quietly, almost unconsciously. The specifics remained hazy, buried under layers of survival. William listened, his face impassive, processing the information like data points. He recognized the desperation, the lack of options. Perfect. Yet against his will, her quiet resilience struck a chord. I see, he said finally. Now, Amelia Vance, will you accept my proposal? Will you carry my child under the terms discussed? Your life changes today, yes or no? Amelia closed her eyes for a long moment. The warmth of the car, the soft leather, the sheer absurdity of it all. It was a gamble, a dangerous one. Trading one form of captivity for another. Perhaps. But it was also a lifeline. A chance. She thought of the cold nights, the gnawing hunger, the utter hopelessness. Then she thought of the future this man offered, a future she could perhaps shape, despite the cost. Her survival instinct, honed sharp by the streets, made the calculation, the risk versus the potential reward. She opened her eyes, meeting his intense grey gaze directly. Her voice when she spoke was quiet but resolute. Yes, she said, I accept. William gave a curt nod, the efficient gesture of a deal closed. He steered the Bentley towards the Upper East Side, towards the grand imposing Davenport mansion, towards the gilded cage where their strange, unlikely bargain would begin. Amelia leaned her head back against the seat, the exhaustion suddenly immense. She looked at William Davenport's profile, sharp, controlled, unreadable. He was offering her a fortune, an escape. But looking at the cold marble and steel edifices flashing past, a chilling thought surfaced. What was the true price of this bargain? And could she afford to pay it? She stared out at the rain-lashed city, the reflection in the window showing a stranger staring back. A woman poised on the edge of salvation, or perhaps another form of damnation entirely. The weight of her choice settled heavily in her stomach, mingled with a spark of steely, desperate resolve. She would survive this, she had to. The heavy vellum of the contract felt cold beneath Amelia's fingers. Each clause a meticulously crafted chain, attempting to bind the unpredictable force of life itself. Yet life had a way of defying signatures and stipulations, whispering possibilities even in the most sterile of agreements. The following afternoon, bathed in the diffuse light filtering through the tall library windows of the Davenport mansion, Amelia descended the grand staircase. She was no longer the rain-soaked wraith William had pulled from the street. Stephanie, his efficient assistant, had worked a quiet magic. Dressed in a simple, dove-grey cashmere dress, clearly expensive but understated, her damp, tangled hair now fell in soft, clean waves around her shoulders, catching the light like spun honey. The grime was gone, revealing pale, clear skin and the fine, almost aristocratic bone structure beneath. The transformation was startling. The inherent dignity she possessed, once obscured by hardship, now shone through, quiet but undeniable. She entered the library, where William stood beside his massive mahogany desk, flanked by his lawyer. Peter Jennings, perhaps mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, turned as she entered. His professional smile was immediate, but as his eyes took in Amelia, something else flickered beneath the surface. A spark of genuine admiration, quickly masked. "Miss Vance," Jennings greeted smoothly, extending a hand. "Peter Jennings. We spoke briefly yesterday about finalizing the agreement." His handshake was firm, his gaze direct, yet it lingered a fraction too long. William watched the interaction, a muscle tightening almost imperceptibly in his jaw. He hadn't anticipated this. He hadn't anticipated the effect clean clothes and warm food would have. He hadn't anticipated this quiet radiance that seemed to emanate from her, nor the unwelcome jolt of something akin to possessiveness that shot through him as Jennings smiled at her. He pushed the feeling down ruthlessly. This was a transaction, nothing more. "Shall we proceed?" William's voice was clipped, colder than intended, cutting through the moment. He gestured towards the chairs arranged before the desk. The contract signing itself was an exercise in detached formality. Peter Jennings explained the key clauses with practiced ease: confidentiality, medical protocols, scheduled payments, the absolute relinquishment of parental rights upon birth, the agreement to leave the country within 90 days thereafter. The language was precise, legalistic, attempting to quantify and control the most profound of human experiences. Amelia listened intently, her stormy blue eyes scanning the dense pages. She wasn't merely skimming. William noted with a flicker of surprise how she paused at Clause 7b regarding unforeseen medical complications. "Mr. Jennings," she asked quietly, her voice steady, "this section implies Mr. Davenport retains sole decision-making authority in any medical emergency regarding the pregnancy, even if—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Even if my own well-being is directly compromised." Jennings looked momentarily taken aback by the direct question, the intelligence behind it. "Ah, yes," he recovered smoothly. "Standard language, Miss Vance, designed to ensure the primary objective of the agreement, the successful gestation, is protected. Naturally, your health is paramount, and the best medical care will always be provided." His reassurance felt practiced, slightly hollow. Amelia held his gaze for a beat longer, then nodded slowly, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, before she picked up the offered pen. Her signature was neat, deliberate. An act of surrender, perhaps, but also, William sensed, an act of will. She had made her choice, understood the terms. William signed his own name with swift efficiency, a deal closed, objective secured. He should have felt relief, satisfaction. Instead, a strange disquiet settled within him. The ensuing weeks fell into a strange rhythm, punctuated by visits to the city's most exclusive fertility clinic. The building itself exuded quiet wealth, hushed corridors, abstract art, staff who moved with discreet efficiency. The procedures were clinical, impersonal. Needles, tests, scans, all conducted with meticulous precision, reducing the miracle of conception to a series of data points and protocols. William accompanied her to each appointment, a silent, imposing presence. He treated it like overseeing a critical acquisition, ensuring timelines were met, protocols followed. He spoke mostly with the doctors, his questions focused on success rates, risk mitigation. He avoided looking directly at Amelia during the procedures, maintaining a studied distance. Amelia, for her part, endured it all with a quiet fortitude that unnerved him. She followed instructions, answered questions politely, her face often pale but composed. Inside, however, a universe of sensation was awakening. The injections, the medications, the constant awareness of her own body as a vessel. It was profoundly intimate, strangely sacred, despite the sterile environment. She found herself thinking less about the contract and more about the possibility growing within her, a tiny spark of potential life wholly dependent on her. It was a terrifying, humbling, and unexpectedly powerful feeling. It was during one such visit, while waiting in a private lounge, that the past brushed against the present. Peter Jennings had stopped by the clinic briefly, ostensibly to drop off some unrelated documents for William to review later. As he placed a leather-bound folder on the table beside Amelia, a sheaf of papers slipped slightly askew. For a fleeting second, Amelia saw it. The familiar stylized DI logo of Davenport Industries printed on an internal memo header next to a subheading mentioning Acquisition Strategy, Legacy Textile Division. Legacy Textiles. The name jolted her. A fragmented memory surfaced, her father, years ago, face ashen, talking about predatory buyouts, about Davenport Industries crushing smaller competitors, about their family business, a small textile design house, suffocating under the weight of a larger rival's aggressive tactics. Had it been Davenport? The memory was hazy, fractured by years of hardship. But the logo, the name, an icy tendril of unease wrapped around her heart. Could it be? Could the man funding this strange new chapter of her life be connected to the very forces that had destroyed her past? She quickly looked away as Jennings retrieved the folder, hoping her sudden pallor went unnoticed. It was probably nothing. Stress. Coincidence. New York was full of big corporations. Still, the seed of doubt, once planted, began to germinate in the fertile ground of her uncertainty. She pushed it down, focusing on the immediate reality, the contract, the pregnancy. She couldn't afford to unravel now. Back at the mansion, the fragile truce continued. They rarely spoke beyond necessities. Yet William found his gaze drawn to her more often. He noticed the worn sketchbook she sometimes carried, the way she would lose herself staring out at the city skyline, her expression distant, melancholic. One evening, finding her asleep, curled uncomfortably on a chaise lounge in the library, a book fallen from her hand, he hesitated, then quietly retrieved a cashmere throw from the sofa and gently draped it over her. He retreated quickly, disturbed by the unfamiliar protective urge. He tried initiating small talk occasionally, inquiring about the book she was reading, or if the kitchen could prepare something specific for her. "Is the temperature comfortable for you in your suite, Amelia?" he asked one evening, the formality feeling stiff even to his own ears. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Davenport." "It's quite comfortable," she replied politely, her eyes meeting his briefly before returning to her book. A subtle barrier firmly in place. He was William Davenport. He controlled markets, built empires, dictated terms. Yet this quiet, unassuming woman, bound to him by a cold contract, was proving to be the most unpredictable variable he had ever encountered. He didn't like it. He didn't like the way she made him feel things he had long since buried. Finally, the day of the insemination procedure arrived. It was swift, clinical, efficient, just as planned. Afterward, as they drove back towards the silent grandeur of the mansion, the weight of the moment pressed down on them both. The city lights streaked past the Bentley's windows, painting fleeting patterns on Amelia's still face. She instinctively, almost unconsciously, rested a hand over her lower abdomen, a gesture both protective and profoundly intimate. William saw the movement from the corner of his eye. He kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, but his grip tightened on the steering wheel. The transaction was complete. The first phase of his plan successfully executed. So why did it feel less like a victory and more like standing on the edge of an unknown precipitous cliff? The silence in the car wasn't empty. It thrummed with the unspoken enormity of what they had just set in motion, a fragile spark of life ignited by a cold, calculated contract. And neither of them knew if it would illuminate their worlds or burn them both to the ground. It wasn't just one heartbeat, but three. A fragile, insistent rhythm against the ultrasound's static hum. Three tiny fluttering echoes in the sterile quiet, reverberating through the room and cracking the very foundations of William Davenport's carefully constructed world. Weeks turned into months, marked by the meticulous routines of prenatal care. The appointment that confirmed the pregnancy was etched vividly in both their minds. They sat in the softly lit examination room, the air thick with unspoken anticipation. Amelia lay on the table, her hands clasped tightly over her abdomen, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. William stood near the door, affecting a casual posture that didn't quite conceal the tension in his shoulders. The gynecologist, Dr. Allen, moved with practiced calm, applying the cool gel to Amelia's skin. The transducer wand swept across her belly. Static hissed from the machine, then thump, thump, thump. A sound impossibly loud in the hushed room, a single strong heartbeat. William felt his own heart constrict, a sharp, unfamiliar pang. Dr. Allen smiled faintly. "There we are, strong and steady." He continued maneuvering the wand. Silence stretched. Then another sound joined the first, slightly offset. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. Two distinct rhythms. Amelia gasped softly, her eyes wide. William leaned forward involuntarily, his gaze riveted to the grayscale screen. Dr. Allen's eyebrows lifted slightly. He adjusted the angle, his movements precise. And then, impossibly, a third rhythm emerged, weaving its way into the sonic tapestry. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. The doctor paused, looked closely at the screen, then turned to them, a slow, astonished smile spreading across his face. "Well," he said, his voice filled with gentle wonder, "life certainly has its surprises. Mr. Davenport, Miss Vance, it appears you're expecting triplets." Triplets. The word hung in the air, momentous, terrifying, utterly life-altering. Amelia's breath hitched, and tears began to stream silently down her face, tears of shock, of overwhelming joy, of a sudden crushing fear at the magnitude of it all. 3 lives, 3 tiny souls entrusted to her care, born from a bargain made in desperation. William stood frozen, speechless. His meticulously crafted plan, one heir, a clean transaction, had just been spectacularly, irrevocably tripled. The scale of it, the sheer biological improbability and overwhelming responsibility, seemed to short-circuit his rational mind. All the control he craved, all the order he imposed on his life, felt utterly meaningless in the face of this unpredictable threefold miracle. He looked at Amelia's tear-streaked face, at the vulnerability and fierce emotion shining in her eyes. And then, moved by an impulse he didn't understand and couldn't control, he stepped forward, leaned down, and pressed a gentle, lingering kiss to her forehead. It was a gesture so foreign to his nature, so far removed from their agreement, that it startled them both. Her hand instinctively rose to cover his on her belly, a silent acknowledgement of the shared, staggering reality. The confirmation of triplets undeniably shifted the ground beneath William's feet. The detachment he had so carefully maintained began to crumble, replaced by something far more complex. An undeniable sense of responsibility, yes, but also fascination. And a growing, deeply unsettling protectiveness towards Amelia. He became, in his own way, obsessively attentive. Stephanie, his assistant, was given meticulously detailed instructions regarding Amelia's diet, comfort, and rest. Non-essential travel was cancelled without explanation. Late at night, the blue light of his tablet often illuminated his study as he devoured medical journals and articles on high-risk multiple pregnancies, his brow furrowed in concentration. His interactions with Amelia, while still carrying a residue of formality, softened. He started joining her for quiet dinners more often, the silence less strained, occasionally filled with his observations about the market or, more rarely, a carefully neutral question about her day. He noticed the worn sketchbook she kept, filled with delicate, intricate drawings, ghosts of a talent left behind. One afternoon, finding her struggling to reach a book on a high shelf in the library, her movements hampered by her growing belly, he was there instantly. Before she could protest, he easily retrieved it for her. "You should ask Elizabeth or Stephanie if you need assistance," he said, his tone gruff, but his eyes held a flicker of genuine concern. The most significant crack in his armor came several weeks later. Amelia, experiencing a wave of dizziness common in multiple pregnancies, swayed slightly as she stood on the terrace overlooking the gardens. William, who happened to be nearby discussing landscaping plans, saw her falter. Without a second thought, discarding years of practiced emotional distance, he crossed the space in 3 long strides, catching her arm gently. "Are you all right?" "Just a little light-headed," she murmured, leaning against him for a brief moment. He didn't call for staff. Instead, surprising them both, he slid an arm around her waist, scooped her surprisingly light form into his arms, and carried her bridal-style back towards the house. Amelia gasped, startled, her hands flying instinctively to his shoulders. "William, Mr. Davenport, I can walk." "Nonsense," he stated, his voice firm but lacking its usual edge. He felt the unexpected fragility of her weight against his chest, the gentle pressure of her hands, the faint scent of the lavender soap she used. He carried her up the sweeping staircase, acutely aware of the intimacy of the act, the utter deviation from their contractual arrangement. He pushed open the door to her suite and gently deposited her onto the plush chaise lounge near the window. It was only then that Amelia truly saw the changes he had wrought in the room over the preceding weeks. The formerly elegant but somewhat impersonal space had been transformed. Soft, cream-colored rugs lay over the polished floors. The lighting was warmer, gentler. Comfortable armchairs and ottomans invited rest, and in one corner, nestled near a window seat piled with cushions, stood 3 identical, beautifully crafted wooden rocking horses. It wasn't an ostentatious display of wealth, but rather a quiet, almost clumsy attempt at creating a sanctuary, a nest. A warmth spread through Amelia, unexpected and potent, quickly followed by a familiar bitter-sweet ache. It was beautiful, thoughtful, and a painful reminder of the life she was nurturing but wouldn't be allowed to share. "William." "You didn't have to," she whispered, overwhelmed. He stood awkwardly for a moment, unused to eliciting such open emotion, or perhaps unused to feeling the impulse behind the gesture. "I thought, with 3, you might require more comfort," he managed, looking away towards the window. "Rest now, Amelia." He retreated, leaving her surrounded by the tangible evidence of his shifting internal landscape. Their conversations, though still infrequent, began to carry more weight. One evening, she spoke hesitantly of her childhood in Provence, the scent of wild herbs, her dream of studying art restoration in Florence, a dream that now felt like it belonged to another lifetime. He listened, truly listened, asking a quiet question or two. In return, he offered a rare glimpse behind his own facade, not of failed marriages, but of a solitary childhood dominated by boarding schools and preoccupied parents, a brief mention of a youthful ambition to be an architect, quickly discarded for the more pragmatic path of finance. These small exchanges were like fragile threads, weaving a tentative connection between 2 isolated souls. Yet beneath this fragile surface, Amelia's secret festered. The connection between Davenport Industries and her family's ruin was no longer a hazy suspicion. Late one night, unable to sleep, driven by a gnawing unease, she had delved into the online archives of financial newspapers. She found it, a series of articles from 7 years prior, detailing Davenport Industries' ruthless, albeit legal, takeover of several smaller firms in the European luxury goods sector. One of them was a niche textile company known for its unique designs, Volier et Fils. Her family's company. The dates aligned perfectly with the start of their financial collapse, her father's subsequent despair, and her own eventual desperate flight to America. The confirmation hit her like a physical blow. She felt sick, dizzy. The man whose children she carried, the man who was showing her unexpected kindness, the man she was perhaps developing feelings for, was inextricably linked to the destruction of everything she had once held dear. The irony was cruel, unbearable. How could she tell him? How could she stay knowing this? But the triplets, they were innocent. They were hers biologically for now. Fear warred with anger, confusion with a nascent, unwanted tenderness towards William. For the sake of the babies, for her own precarious safety within this gilded cage, she buried the truth deep inside, a toxic secret poisoning the fragile shoots of connection that had begun to grow between them. As her pregnancy advanced, a strange, tense peace settled over the mansion. William's attentiveness grew, his gaze often resting on her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. sometimes with fear, sometimes with something else entirely. She would sit on the terrace in the evenings, feeling the 3 small lives fluttering within her, the weight of her secret a heavy counterpoint to the physical weight she carried. William would often join her, sitting in silence, watching the twilight paint the city skyline in hues of bruised purple and fading gold. The air between them hummed with unspoken emotions, with secrets held tight, with the undeniable, terrifying truth that their lives were now irrevocably intertwined, heading towards a future neither of them could predict or control. The calm they both sensed couldn't last. A storm was gathering. The first cry sliced through the sterile air of the delivery room, thin, reedy, yet utterly defiant. It was followed quickly by another, then a third, a fragile symphony of new life that resonated deep within William Davenport's bones. Each tiny breath, however, felt like the tick of an invisible clock, counting down the moments until the woman who gave them life was contractually obligated to walk away. The preceding hours had been a blur of controlled chaos and raw primal effort. Amelia, pale and sweat-drenched but resolute, had endured the labor with a strength that astonished William. He'd stayed beside her throughout, a fixed point in the whirlwind of doctors and nurses. He held her hand, murmuring words of encouragement that felt inadequate, his usual command dissolving into shared vulnerability. He'd witnessed billion-dollar deals collapse, faced hostile takeovers, navigated treacherous market fluctuations, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer, terrifying, awe-inspiring power of birth. First came a son, tiny and perfect, his cry surprisingly robust. Then another boy, slightly smaller, his arrival quieter. And finally a daughter, delicate and fine-featured. 3 miracles, extracted from the abstract realm of contracts and clinics, now breathing, squirming realities. As the nurses cleaned and swaddled the infants, William felt a profound, disorienting shift within him. As if tectonic plates were rearranging his inner world. He was a father, 3 times over. The thought was staggering. Exhausted but luminous, Amelia reached out, her arms trembling slightly. The nurses gently placed the swaddled bundles beside her. She touched each tiny face with reverent fingers, her eyes brimming with an emotion so potent it seemed to light the room from within. Pure, unadulterated love, a love born instantly, fiercely, irrevocably. "Oh," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "They're perfect. Absolutely perfect." William watched her, his throat tight. He saw the fierce maternal bond form in that instant, undeniable and absolute. He saw the way her gaze devoured every detail of her children, memorizing them. It was beautiful. It was profound. And it was, according to the document gathering dust in his study, temporary. The shift, when it came, was subtle at first, a shadow crossing her radiant expression. The tears of joy began to mingle with something else, a deeper, more painful current. Her breath hitched into a sob, then another. The reality of the 90-day clause, the impending separation mandated by the contract he had authored, crashed down upon her with brutal force. "William," she choked out, her gaze lifting to meet his, filled with a desperate, heart-wrenching plea. I can't leave them." Her hands tightened protectively around the tiny bundles. "They're my babies. Mine. Please, don't make me leave them. This contract, it doesn't matter now. This is what matters." She gestured towards the infants, her voice breaking entirely. "I don't want the money. I just want them." Her raw anguish struck William like a physical blow. He saw past the agreement, past the legalities, and saw only a mother ripped apart by the prospect of abandoning her children. His carefully constructed logic, his justifications for the cold transaction, evaporated, leaving behind a sickening residue of guilt. He had engineered this. He had created this impossible situation, blinded by his own fear and cynicism. He reached out, wanting to offer comfort, reassurance, something. But what could he say? The contract was clear, his throat closed, words failing him. He could only stand there, a helpless witness to the devastating consequences of his own calculated actions, his heart aching with a pain that felt disturbingly like hers. The next morning brought a fragile quiet to the hospital room. Amelia, though physically drained, held an aura of weary peace as she watched her newborns sleep in their bassinets. William had spent the night fitfully in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, unwilling to leave, caught in a vortex of conflicting emotions. He felt an overwhelming urge to protect this fragile family unit he had inadvertently created, yet he was bound by the very document he'd designed to prevent such messy entanglements. He slipped out briefly around mid-morning, needing coffee, needing a moment to think away from the room's intense emotional charge. When he returned, navigating the hospital corridor with a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, he paused just outside Amelia's slightly ajar door. He heard voices, Amelia's soft murmur, and a smooth, confident male tone he recognized instantly. Peter Jennings. He pushed the door open silently. His lawyer sat in the chair William had recently vacated, leaning slightly towards Amelia. The room was suddenly filled with flowers, extravagant bouquets of lilies, roses, and orchids crowding every available surface. Peter held one of Amelia's hands gently in his own. "Extraordinary woman, Amelia," Peter was saying, his voice low and sincere, a warmth William had never heard him use professionally. "I know this is sudden, perhaps overwhelming, but seeing your strength through all this, I couldn't let another moment pass. What I feel is genuine." He paused, his gaze earnest. "I want to offer you something real, something stable, a life where you are cherished, not contracted." He squeezed her hand gently. "A home, security, without conditions, without clauses, just us." He produced a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Amelia Vance," Peter Jennings said, his voice resonating with conviction, "will you marry me?" William froze in the doorway, the coffee cup suddenly heavy in his hand. The flowers, the ring, the earnest confession. It wasn't just a courtesy visit. His lawyer, his trusted legal advisor, was in love with the mother of his children and was proposing marriage, offering her the very escape clause William himself was wrestling with. The sound of William clearing his throat startled them both. Peter released Amelia's hand, turning smoothly, his professional composure snapping back into place, though a slight flush crept up his neck. Amelia looked from Peter to William, her eyes wide with shock and exhaustion. "William," Peter greeted, rising from the chair with practiced ease. "Didn't expect you back quite so soon. Just came to see how Miss Vance was recovering, offer my congratulations." He gestured vaguely towards the flowers. William stepped fully into the room, his gaze sweeping over the floral arrangements, then settling coolly on his lawyer. "Generous of you, Peter," he said, his voice deceptively mild, though an icy edge ran beneath it. "Though perhaps a touch premature?" "Concern for a client's well-being is never premature," Peter countered smoothly, meeting William's stare. "And proposals of marriage?" William's voice dropped, tightening with barely suppressed anger and something else, raw jealousy. "Is that now part of the standard legal service package?" "This isn't about legal service, William, and you know it," Peter retorted, his composure starting to fray. "This is about offering Amelia a choice, a life built on affection and respect, not a business deal." "A business deal you drafted," William shot back, taking a step closer. "Stop it." Amelia's voice, though weak, cut through the tension. She raised a trembling hand to her forehead. "Please, both of you, just stop. Not now. I need to rest." The two men fell silent, the animosity still crackling between them. Peter cast a final concerned look at Amelia. "Rest well, Amelia," he said softly. "My offer stands. I'll be in touch." He gave William a curt nod and exited the room. William remained, rooted to the spot, the scent of lilies suddenly cloying. He looked at Amelia, pale and distressed against the pillows, then at the empty chair Peter had occupied, then back at the triplets, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm raging around them. The floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet. Peter's offer wasn't just a complication, it was a viable alternative for Amelia, a way out. And William realized, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, that he might have just driven the woman he was falling desperately in love with straight into the arms of another man. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken fears and the terrifying possibility of losing everything that had unexpectedly come to matter. 90 days, the number hammered relentlessly in Amelia's mind, each tick of the ornate grandfather clock in the hall echoing the impossible deadline. 90 days since the triplets drew their first breaths, 90 days stipulated in cold ink for her to vanish. The final day dawned grey and oppressive, mirroring the suffocating weight in her chest. Upstairs, in the suite that had become both sanctuary and prison, Amelia moved like an automaton. She packed the single worn suitcase she'd arrived with. It felt heavier now, though it held little more than before. A few changes of simple clothes, the worn sketchbook filled with recent tentative drawings, nothing that truly belonged in this house of polished surfaces and silent wealth. The money William had transferred, a staggering sum meant to secure her future, sat untouched in an account she hadn't accessed. It felt tainted, the price of her children, the price of her silence. Her real farewells were conducted in the nursery, a room now vibrant with soft colours and the gentle scent of baby powder. She lingered over each bassinet, her heart physically aching. Liam, small and serious like his father. Noah, the restless one, already showing a spark of mischief. And little Sophie, delicate and watchful. Amelia touched each downy cheek, kissed each tiny forehead, whispering promises she knew she couldn't keep, her tears falling silently onto their sleeping forms. Be brave. Be kind. Know that you were loved, fiercely, completely. Etching every perfect feature into her memory, their tiny fingers curled trustingly, the soft rise and fall of their chests felt like tearing strips from her own soul. I should have stayed on the streets, a treacherous thought whispered through her grief. Better the cold and hunger than this agony. With leaden steps, she finally pulled herself away, closing the nursery door softly behind her. She picked up the suitcase. Each step down the sweeping grand staircase echoed in the cavernous hall, amplifying her solitude, her heartbreak. The massive oak front door loomed ahead, a portal back to a life she no longer knew how to navigate, away from the only thing that now mattered. Her hand trembled as she reached for the heavy brass handle. Draw a deep breath. Honor the agreement. Disappear. Amelia. His voice, sharp with an unfamiliar edge of panic, cut through the silence from behind her. William Davenport stood at the entrance to the main hall, his face pale, his eyes narrowed. She froze, her back still to him, unable to turn, unable to speak. "Where do you think you're going?" he pressed, his voice tighter now. He took a step closer. "It's Jennings, isn't it? His offer, stability, a real life. Is that where you're running?" The accusation, raw and laced with fear, hung between them. The injustice of it, layered on top of her grief and the secret she carried, snapped something within her. Slowly, deliberately, Amelia turned to face him. Her face was tear-streaked, but her eyes, those stormy blue eyes that had first unsettled him, now held a fire he hadn't seen before. "Him," she echoed, her voice low, trembling with a mixture of pain and rising anger. "You think, after everything, this is about Peter Jennings?" A harsh, broken laugh escaped her lips. "You understand nothing, William. Nothing at all." She saw the confusion flicker in his eyes, momentarily overriding the fear. "Then why?" he demanded. "The contract, is that it? Just tell me what you want. More money? Name it." "Money?" Amelia shook her head, the movement sharp, dismissive. This was never just about the contract, not entirely. "Not for me." She took a shaky breath, the words she had buried for months clawing their way out. "Do you even know who I am, William? Beyond the homeless woman you picked up, the vessel you hired?" He frowned, perplexed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about why I was on that street," she continued, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "Why my family lost everything. Why my father... why he gave up." Her gaze locked onto his, sharp and piercing. "I'm talking about Davenport Industries. About an acquisition 7 years ago. Legacy Textiles. Volier et Fils. Does that name mean anything to you?" He stared at her, comprehension dawning slowly, chillingly, across his features. He searched his memory, years of deals, acquisitions, ruthless expansion. Volier et Fils, a small European textile house. Absorbed, restructured, its assets likely liquidated. collateral damage in the relentless march of his empire building. He remembered the deal vaguely, efficient, profitable, insignificant until this moment. You, he whispered, the connection finally, horribly clear. Your family. My family, Amelia confirmed, the words tasting like ash. Your company's aggressive strategy destroyed it. Destroyed my father, led directly to this. She gestured vaguely around the opulent hall, then back at herself, her worn suitcase. The bitter irony, isn't it? Carrying the heir for the man whose empire was built, in part, on the ruins of my family's life. The revelation struck William with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back a step, his face ashen. It wasn't just indirect responsibility anymore, it was a direct, devastating link. The carefully constructed narrative of his life, success built on acumen and hard work, fractured, revealing the human cost he had always chosen to ignore. The woman standing before him, the mother of his children, the woman whose quiet strength had somehow breached his defenses. Her suffering was inextricably tied to his own past actions. The guilt was suffocating, absolute. His world tilted, his justifications turning to dust. He looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing not just the woman he'd come to care for, but the ghost of a past he could no longer deny. The carefully controlled facade crumbled. With a choked sound, he reached into his inner jacket pocket, his hand trembling, and pulled out the folded contract, the symbol of their cold beginning, the source of her current agony. He didn't speak. He simply held it before her, his eyes filled with a despair that mirrored her own. Then, with a sudden, violent surge of emotion, remorse, self-loathing, desperation, he began tearing the heavy paper, ripping it again and again, letting the shredded pieces flutter unheeded to the polished marble floor. Each tear felt like severing a tie to the man he used to be. When the last piece fell, he sank to his knees before her, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. "Amelia," his voice was ragged, broken, "forgive me, I didn't know. About your family. About the connection. God, I was so blind." He looked up, his eyes raw with pain and a vulnerability she had never witnessed. "The contract, it means nothing. It meant nothing the moment I saw you cry for our children. Please," his voice cracked, "don't go. Not because of the contract, not even because of the children, if you can't bear to stay near me." He took a ragged breath. "Stay because I need a chance. A chance to try. To somehow atone for the pain I've caused, even unknowingly. To build something real, something honest, from this wreckage. If you'll let me." Amelia watched him, the powerful William Davenport, kneeling at her feet, utterly undone. Her own anger began to recede, replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. Her secret was out, his remorse laid bare. She reached down, her fingers trembling slightly, and gently touched his bowed head. "William," she whispered, tears blurring her vision again. He looked up, hope flickering desperately in his eyes. The words caught in her throat. "I do love you." The admission hung between them, fragile and true. "Against all reason I do. From the beginning, perhaps." She gave a small, watery smile. "But love, it doesn't erase the past. The contract, what happened to my family. Those are deep wounds, William." She searched his face, her own heart torn. How do we even begin to heal from this?" He reached up, clasping her hand tightly, clinging to it like a lifeline. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion, "but I want to try. With you, if you'll give us that chance." They knelt there together, amidst the scattered fragments of the broken contract, two souls stripped bare by truth and pain. Love had been confessed, secrets unveiled, but the chasm opened by the past remained wide and deep. Could they build a bridge strong enough to cross it? Or would the weight of what lay between them ultimately pull them apart? The future, shrouded in uncertainty, awaited their first tentative step. The silence in the Davenport mansion was different now. It was no longer the sterile emptiness of loneliness, nor the brittle tension preceding a storm. Instead, it was a quiet filled with the cautious weight of unspoken apologies. the fragile beginnings of difficult conversations, and the undeniable presence of 3 tiny heartbeats weaving new, unpredictable patterns into the fabric of their lives. In the weeks that followed the raw honesty of their confrontation, the path forward was far from smooth. Healing, they quickly discovered, was not a linear process, but a painstaking excavation, layer by painful layer. There were days filled with a tentative hope, punctuated by shared smiles over the triplets' antics, Liam's solemn stare, Noah's surprisingly strong grip, Sophie's contented gurgles. But there were also days when the ghosts of the past rose unbidden. One evening, exhaustion fraying their nerves after a particularly challenging day with the babies, a carelessly phrased comment from William about financial security triggered a flash of Amelia's buried anger. "Security," she retorted, her voice tight. "Is that what you thought you were buying that day, William? Security built on someone else's ruin." The old William might have retreated behind icy silence or sharp defense. The new William flinched, absorbing the hit, his face etched with genuine remorse. "No, Amelia," he said quietly, meeting her pained gaze. "No, I was wrong, blind and arrogant. There's no excuse for what my company did, or for how I treated you initially. All I can do now is try to be better. For you. For them." These conversations were exhausting, necessary. They talked late into the night sometimes, after the babies were asleep, picking through the wreckage of the past, her family's lost business, his crippling fear of vulnerability, the fundamental flaws in the contract that had brought them together yet nearly torn them apart. There were tears, raised voices, long stretches of difficult silence. But slowly, painstakingly, understanding began to dawn. Trust, they learned, wasn't rebuilt with grand gestures, but with the consistent, quiet effort of showing up, listening, and acknowledging the hurt. William's change manifested not just in words, but in tangible actions. He threw himself into fatherhood with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. He learned the intricate art of swaddling, mastered the rhythm of midnight feedings, discovered an unexpected patience for soothing colicky cries. He actively sought Amelia's input on everything related to the children, deferring to her instincts, acknowledging her primary connection. It was a quiet ceding of control, a demonstration of respect that spoke volumes. Beyond the nursery, the tremors of his internal shift reached into his professional life. He initiated a discreet internal review of Davenport Industries' past acquisition practices, establishing stricter ethical guidelines for the future. More significantly, driven by the stark reality of Amelia's past, he established the Vance Foundation, named discreetly in honor of her family, dedicated to providing resources for those experiencing homelessness and offering grants to struggling small businesses, particularly in the arts sector. He didn't announce it with fanfare. It was a quiet, determined act of atonement, a way to channel his immense resources towards rectifying, in some small way, the kind of systemic hardship his past actions had contributed to. He discussed the foundation's structure with Amelia, seeking her perspective, making it a shared endeavor in spirit, if not in name. Amelia, meanwhile, began carefully reclaiming pieces of herself. The mansion, once a symbol of her captivity, started to feel different. Less like a cage, more like a space with potential. With William's quiet encouragement, she converted a sunlit room overlooking the gardens into a small art studio. The scent of turpentine and linseed oil began to mingle with the scent of baby powder. She enrolled in an online art history course, rediscovering the intellectual passion she thought had been extinguished forever. She set boundaries, too. When William, in a moment of reverting to old habits, made a unilateral decision regarding the triplets' future childcare, she addressed it calmly but firmly. "William, we need to decide these things together," she stated, her voice even. "I appreciate your intentions, but I am their mother, and we are partners in this. We need to operate as such." He had looked startled, then nodded slowly, acknowledging her point. It was a small victory, but significant. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to trust again, day by day, while still honoring her own needs and voice. Peter Jennings faded respectfully into the background after a brief professional call with William, where apologies were offered and accepted with civility. The outside world, with its inevitable curiosity and potential judgment about their unconventional arrangement, was kept at bay by a united private front. Life settled into a new rhythm, chaotic and demanding, yet underpinned by a growing tenderness. There were evenings spent side by side on the sofa after the triplets were finally asleep. Not necessarily talking, but sharing the comfortable silence, the exhaustion, the quiet miracle of their children breathing softly nearby. There were shared smiles over Noah's first determined attempts to crawl, quiet debates about Liam's stubborn refusal of pureed peas, moments of sheer wonder watching Sophie discover her own toes. These small, everyday intimacies became the mortar binding the fragile bricks of their relationship. Months later, autumn painted Central Park in fiery hues of crimson and gold. William pushed a triple stroller along the leaf-strewn path, laughing as Noah reached out, trying to grab the colorful leaves. Liam watched solemnly from his seat, while Sophie dozed peacefully. Amelia sat on a nearby bench, her sketchbook open on her lap, capturing the scene with swift, confident strokes. She looked different now, still slender, but with a healthy glow, her eyes holding a calm depth that hadn't been there before. William maneuvered the stroller beside the bench and sat down, stretching out his legs. He glanced at her sketch, a fond smile touching his lips. "You've captured Noah's impatience perfectly." She smiled back, a genuine, easy smile. "He takes after someone I know." He chuckled, bumping her shoulder gently with his. "The foundation finalized the funding for the Downtown Arts Incubator this morning," he mentioned casually. "That's wonderful, William," she said sincerely, her eyes shining with approval. "Really wonderful." He looked at her, then at their children, then back at her, his gaze filled with a quiet intensity, a love that no longer needed grand declarations. He reached over, his hand covering hers where it rested on the sketchbook. She didn't pull away. Her fingers interlaced naturally with his. They sat there for a long moment, bathed in the golden afternoon light, the sounds of the city a distant murmur. The scars of their beginning remained. They always would. The path they had walked had been fraught with pain, secrets, and near misses. But the contract was gone, replaced by something infinitely more complex and resilient. A conscious choice, made daily, to build a life together, to heal, to trust, to love. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, written in neat, predictable lines. It was something real, something earned. A bridge built painstakingly across a chasm, strong enough now to bear the weight of their shared future. One hopeful, imperfect day at a time. And so, from the fragments of a broken contract and the weight of a painful past, William and Amelia began the quiet, challenging work of building a bridge. Not with grand promises, but with the daily acts of listening, forgiving, taking responsibility, and choosing connection over cynicism. Their journey reminds us that true redemption isn't found in erasing the past, but in having the courage to build a different future from its lessons. Love, they discovered, wasn't the absence of scars, but the willingness to heal together. This story explored deep wounds, unexpected bonds, and the messy, beautiful reality of second chances. Perhaps it resonated with you. Perhaps it sparked a thought or stirred an emotion. We truly hope it did. If William and Amelia's path touched your heart, please show your support by giving this video a like. It means the world to us and helps others find these stories. Feel free to share it with friends or family who might connect with its message. And we genuinely want to hear from you in the comments below. What are your thoughts on their journey towards healing and forgiveness? Did any part of the story particularly stand out to you? Or do you have any suggestions on how we can improve our storytelling, or what kinds of stories you'd like to see next? Your feedback is invaluable in helping us grow this community. Finally, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click the notification bell for more meaningful stories about the complexities of the human heart. Thank you so much for watching, for engaging, and for being part of our community. We'll see you in the next story.